Hi, it's me, Aki from Bringforth. This is set 84, part 1. Incidentally, my birth year, 84. Yay, go 80s! 90s perhaps is more my thing. Captain Planet and such. But anyway, I'm gonna upload this one and probably upload the previous ones at the same time I upload this one. I haven't been uploading these in a while, but I've been keeping doing them. I woke up feeling really groggy, really out of my body groggy, and I deduced that this was because I did a healing for one of the other patrons here. I popped their neck, and that was probably a really deep locked up thing because it felt for me as well. That's what I feel it was. I also smoked a bunch of weed yesterday, but I haven't been waking up that groggy from weed. I literally felt like my feet were two feet off the ground, like I was floating. It was unusual. Good sympathetic connections. So now that we're gonna update the game model, I can discuss one of the most interesting things in it, and that's the number of children. Because when we started, the average woman in Finland had something like 1 point something children, like 1.7 or something. And that is too high because we are observing the actual population from the point of view of the people in the bottom. So it gives the impression that everybody needs to have that amount of kids before they're normal. So now that we jump to no immigration and one-child policy and the population growth continues like I predicted it would, the actual number of children per woman is going to probably fall below 1, and then I can actually determine if I have a kid or not. If I'm supposed to treat the universe like I have a kid or not. So that's that moment. The population growth is probably going to increase because old people will continue to have family members. So that will probably influence the system somewhat. But if the population fertility rate doesn't lower below 1, then I know that I have a kid somewhere that is mine in a way. And if it does fall below 1, how much it falls basically determines whether or not I have a 0.8 kid or 0.1 kid. So whether or not I have a kid where it's more than 50% mine or it's less than 50% mine, and that will allow me to do some important math for my future. Because this doesn't include the regions of Karjala and the expanded area that we originally thought to add. This just includes the local region, so it doesn't include what you would call game characters or fantasy characters or people of that nature. It only includes those actively in the country. So if that increases above 1 kid, then we know what the situation is, and if it's below 1 kid, we also know what the situation is. So it's gonna be good. It's gonna be very helpful for us. Then we probably have enough time to, at some point in the near future, to do the, let's call it Nordic people homeland model, where we just have all the territories that the Nordics have historically thought, including the expanded Finland as the basis. And that would leave one of the Baltic states due to the limitations of the map, but it would include Leningrad, something we wouldn't actually take. We would take half of the city because it's half Nordic, half Russian. It's quite clearly the historic point, like Novgorod was mostly non-Russian until it turned into a Russian city a long time ago. So we're gonna have it simulated to be half something and half another, and since the model can't do that properly, we will probably take it and give the one of the Baltic states, probably Estonia, to the Russians, and that will be what we will look at as the Baltic home, because we are sure that we would let Russians continue to have access to the sea. Realistically, they would probably hold most of the Leningrad port region and Sosny Bor, instead of Estonia, and probably the citizens of Leningrad and some of the northern regions would convert to us if we actually did form a unified state. This is keeping in mind we're assuming that every region that wants to join will be allowed to join instead of there being any limitation on whether or not they could join. This is for that purpose only. We would also take Lunenburg from Germany, because that was where the historic southern part of the Kalmar Union region extended to before Germany unified, and so this is going to be taken from both sides and having the center. We might also take Ireland and Scotland, but not England itself, and we may also take Netherlands, but I don't know. Netherlands doesn't seem like it's Nordic, it seems like it's Central European. That will allow us to have some kind of comparison data to what the Nordic countries actually look like, what the region has in terms of purchasing power, and what it would be able to do and what it wouldn't be able to do, and so on. That's something we would also want to model, but it's nowhere near as important as getting our Finnish model to work. We will probably play for 4 years from the starting date and simulate one government period. And we will probably try to do the renewable upgrade and have all the social updates in one go, so we don't have to adjust them while we go. So probably due to using the system to support a lot of the things that we actually want that we haven't been able to do, because they are either expensive or unavailable at the moment, but at that simulation we would have the money due to the loan system that we are using. We're assuming that we would be allowed to max out our bank account to do this. In that case, the support will probably jump to 100% initially, and that will probably be where it stays, because we don't need to adjust the settings, and the only setting that we'll actually adjust is to lower the IT tax, or what you would call the GD debt system. Because we found that if you increase taxation on IT products a lot, you will make an insane amount of money. There are some downsides to this, but they are low compared to how much IT products people actually use and don't take care of properly. So an increased tax on that will actually influence people to take care of their electronics without influencing the economy of the region in a drastic measure, such as increasing the fuel tax, which would be very bad. So we'll increase IT tax to pay for this. And because we will be paying back our loans and not having unemployed people after the first few months, we will lower the IT tax after that. But initially we will have to jump it for a few moments to pay back our debts and so on. So because the game system and the real world economy doesn't completely cover or understand what we're doing, it's gonna look a little bit weird. And we'll remain in the European Union in this particular model, so we don't have the ability to adjust our currency rate or interest rate, so we can't make our money more valuable. So we'll have to make do with increasing wages, which isn't something that I'd want to do, but we'll have to do anyway. So wages will probably be proportional to the real world, so they can be taken for their real world numbers, and professional soldiers and such will probably see their wage roughly doubled, and researchers will also get a fairly high wage, but they won't get an insanely high wage. So we expect to increase the low wages more than the high wages. So that's about the size of it. Norse map seems very enthusiastic to see what happens. It seems very alive with interest. But I can see the division of the world slowly forming here as well. But it's clear we need to absolutely block immigration even from regions that we like, or to lower the number, or our population predictions will go bananas. And we need to go to one-child policy, which we've translated as one-family policy, meaning that people will be punished for cheating on their spouses, but we haven't decided how. We will at the same time have moral police, which means that there will actually be punishment for people acting in an inappropriate way that isn't technically illegal. And there will be political police, something we didn't have before, to make sure that the elections are genuine and that everything actually happens according to the political framework that we have designed. So those will be large new costs, but they are acceptable. They are on the order of under $1 billion each, so they are small for our country, but they are things that we need to do. We need to have a professional internal investigation and a professional political police and a professional moral police. We need to do this or we are humped. And by moral police, we mean people who police things that aren't technically legal but should not be done. So, for example, urinating on the street is technically legal in this new model, but it's under the moral police, meaning that you shouldn't do it. Because animals have the right, when they are pets, to urinate but not take a dump on the street. That is where the legality goes. And anything that the police officers seem to do on their own is also legal. So if you have a horse, you're legally allowed to drive it across town and poop on the streets until the police clean up their actions. That is the kind of work that we need to do by internal police, because this system doesn't work. The police horses, for example, don't wear diapers, so they shit on the street. So that is something that has gone uncleaned for months on the street, and this is, for a Western advanced democracy, this is unacceptable. I mean, completely unacceptable. So we'll model this thing. And if people understand why I need to do the model, they can slowly adjust to that model being the real situation and the media being on the outside, but that takes time. So there's no real rush, but you understand why I'm doing this. Police horses need diapers. That's a point I want to make. And by saying police horses need diapers, the actual alternative that everybody's going to go for is that we need professional street cleanup that doesn't take a month to get to the side of the dirt. And that's basically the real version of what we need. And all these small upgrades are going to increase the employment without us having to do what you'd call a government project to increase the employment rating. So once we go through all of those small things, we will attempt to see if the unemployment is at 3% or less. And if it isn't, we will start to increase the retirement rights of people. So retirement will come earlier and work time will be less. But we will first see how well the unemployment system works if we actually fully fund it and so on. It's also possible we will switch to the 4-day work week regardless of how much unemployment there is, because it seems to me that 4 days would be the optimum weekend. 4 days would be the optimum work period for the moment. 3 days would be even better, but it's probably too expensive for the moment. because we don't have the money to pay for a 4-day weekend yet, but we do have for a 3-day weekend. So I'm going to assume that people understand that it doesn't mean that you're forced to work for 4 days a week. It means that at the 5th day you will be paid 150%, or the company will hire somebody else as well. So it should be for a company the exact same amount of money to hire somebody to work on the 1 day on the weekend and have somebody else work for 4 days. It should be the exact same amount of money. It's not gonna be, because the system doesn't work, but that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to increase basically people's opportunity to overwork and gain a lot more money, or for companies to save money and hire 2 people at the cost of 1 person. Because once you really actually need legally a person for 2 weeks, or rather 2 people for a week work, then you really understand that you actually need more employees. This is on the assumption that we have the money to pay for it. If the GDP drops too much because of our attempts, then it's quite clear that we can't do this, because even if we pay for everything with the GD tax and then at the same time have these things to increase our condition of living, the GDP per capita will still decrease, even if we were to assume that we would make money from nothing, because GDP decreasing at that point is because people don't need to work so hard anymore. And this is especially bad in situations where you also control your own currency interest rate, because you can actually result in a situation where everybody in the country gets everything they want, but foreign products are so expensive that nobody can afford them under any conditions. So you create kind of a communist utopia where everybody's rich but nobody has anything. So that's a realistic possibility for the end scenario of our model. However, I would estimate that we don't drop as low as, for example, Poland or Estonia, and both of those are still acceptable living standards, considering that we're talking about the average for people who work 4 days, not 5, 4 days. And if we go with 4 days and 6 hours per day, we could just as easily go with 3 days. So if we go with a 3-day, 8-hour per day week, which is still a bit heavy, considering you're working just to support yourself. We're not talking about a person who wants a house. We're talking about a person who wants to live on rent and chew bubble gum. We're talking about the basic Joe who doesn't want to live in the society all that much, but just happens to end up living there. The basic moneyless edition. We're talking about their standard of living and their ability to survive. We're not talking about people who actually want to work. If you want to work and you have a history of working overtime, none of these changes will most likely influence you. This is just for people who actually don't really want to work all that much, but still want to live in the state. Because asking for people to go to work at basically when school starts and ending it when basically they have retirement, to have just one apartment that they don't even completely own is wrong. Edellinen ei ollut siinä kovin pitkä.
Anteeksi.
Edellinen ei ollut siinä kovin pitkä. Tervetuloa kerrokselle.
Joo, kiitos.
Mä saatan sit yöllä vähän yskiä, että se ei herää.
No, mulla tulee koko ajan. Mä saisin, kun mä tulin tänne.
Joo.
Mulla on voinut yskä tulee aika pitkille.
Joo, tää on huono ilma sisällä.
Joo.
Meillä on yleensä noin ikkunat auki. Staff told me to clean, so I'm cleaning even though there should only be a cleaning on Friday and it should be according to rules allowed to be as picky as we want to be with the cleaning on Friday and be sure that we can actually clean. We can tolerate our own filth, if you will. So I'm feeling a little oppressed here. But this is a homeless shelter and the staff isn't all that in tune. So sometimes things like these happen. To me this feels like military training gone wrong. Like they're trying to have a military mindset and they are just doing wrong commands. Feels like the Polkaat Intti, the clothing stack at Army, which you always have to have in perfect order, even though you're basically allowed to use drugs on the grounds. So, it feels like that to me. And everybody knows about the drug use in the Army. It's a widely known problem. The bosses or the staffers aren't mentioning it that much, but everybody who knows anybody in the Army knows that there's a huge drug abuse problem.